Welcome to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/VinArmani. Also on Twitter and Periscope at VinArmani is my handle there. In addition to that, we are, of course, streaming live on the Facebook page of our wonderful content partner, Activist Post. That's facebook.com/Activist Post. Well, it's 10 a.m. on Monday morning, and so we are back again coming to you live from fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. I say we, but as you can see, I'm in the control room today. Second week in a row, we're without Christian, but things are going great for him. He needs to be doing what he's doing, but next week, he has assured me that he will be back. So I figured, as opposed to last week, I tried handling things from my normal seat and doing a whole remote, very technological thing, but we're on the cutting edge of the particular software and technology that we're using, so it got glitchy. I ended up here anyway, so I'll be sitting in this seat today, and it'll just be me. But I have so much stuff today that it's not even going to be a problem. It'll be a much more intimate show. It'll just be us. So we've got a great show today. Some great stories. Story about the Pope and his take on libertarianism. Shocking. I think this is really going to surprise you. Also, going to get into a little bit of a discussion about the Antifa and anti-Antifa, this whole free speech fight, particularly what's being called the Battle for Berkeley, which is a series of protests and clashes that have been taking place over the last several months, all based around different conservative speakers being deplatformed, as they say, over at Berkeley, just one of the many universities where that's happening. And also a story about Google's new project that has some nefarious aspects to it that definitely need to be discussed, and also how the new form of censorship, also a different style of silencing, is happening. Things we need to be paying attention to, some trends that are upcoming. In addition to that, our second hour today, I'm very, very happy to have Adam Kokesh as our guest. We're going to talk about his recent arrest. You may know or may not know that he was arrested recently in D.C. while taking part in an anti-war protest. He's going to talk to us all about that. And also we're going to talk about Kokesh for Not President, which is his presidential campaign run in 2020. So we have some great information on that, a great show. Speaking of arrests, and I think that it's a good way to jump this whole thing off. You know, I've been speaking for the last 6 months on this show about the fact that we have a level of collectivism that really, I think, manifests itself where we really see it is in government bureaucracy, but it's pervading into even the ideologies that people have. I mean, the battles taking place in Berkeley are really between collectivists on the left and collectivists on the right, trying to battle it out for the reins of state power and for basically the only seat at the table, no dialogue. Collectivists are very much anti-dialogue. I spent this last Wednesday afternoon arrested and in jail myself. And I thought that I would share the story with you because it is an example of exactly when I talk about the state, this is exactly what I see as the issue with the state that I'm trying to deal with. So let me set the stage for you. I'm driving along about a block away from my house. I see police officers behind me, and they pull me over. I didn't know what they had pulled me over for. A guy comes up to the window, license, registration. Do you know why I pulled you over? No, I have absolutely no idea. He said, you were making a left turn, and you didn't turn into the lane you were supposed to turn into. You went one lane further. I think this is something a lot of people do on a light, not even something I would be paying attention to. As it turns out, and it's sort of important to this story, I was driving through a neighborhood that's a little bit sketchy. I had to get through that neighborhood to get to my neighborhood, an older neighborhood in Las Vegas. And I will admit it, my car does look a little bit like what you would profile a drug dealer's car to look like. It's pretty low slung to the ground, tinted windows, lots of chrome, big rims, nice wheels. So it turns out that this guy was a rookie actually being trained and on his first day. So they were sort of road pirating out there trying to, and I'm sure that I was profiled for that reason because they said, oh, well, let's pull this guy over. He might have some drugs on him. He might have a warrant. Well, it turns out he takes my stuff. He comes back. He says, can you please step out of the car? Now, this shocked me. And of course, it had my heart racing because I'm like, what the hell is going on? And he said, you have a warrant for your arrest. I'm like, what the hell is this? I said, well, what is it for? He said, it's for displaying, his first thing that he said was, it's for displaying a fake VIN number on your car. This blew my mind. I'm like, this is crazy. What the hell is happening? They clink me up. So his partner says, actually, look, this is for a fictitious registration. Now, let me go back a little ways, and I will tell you exactly how this thing wound up. In Nevada, it's not a law. And again, this is the creeping collectivism. It's not a law, but they have, and I don't know if they do this in other states. They didn't do it in California, at least not when I had moved. They actually have a link between the insurance companies and the DMV, and they link your insurance to your registration. So you can't register your car if it's uninsured or you're uninsured. The individual who's the owner of the car at least doesn't have liability insurance. And then if your insurance lapses, they institute a fine, they suspend your registration, you have to go in, pay this fine, if it even lapses for 1 day, because it's recorded. Pay this fine, get your registration reinstated. If you don't, and you're driving out there, you're driving on a suspended registration, right? It's like driving with no registration. So, back when I was getting my latest registration, this is like last summer, this is basically like a year ago, I decided, I'm going to switch my insurance. And just sort of messed up the date, went to go get my registration at a DMV kiosk, and it said, your insurance has lapsed. I had canceled it for that month. I thought that it went all the way through. Simple mistake. I was like, okay. Called the new insurance company, Geico. Actually ended up saving 15%. Just great. And got my insurance reinstated. Went to the DMV kiosk, or got new insurance. Went to the DMV kiosk, and it issued me a new registration. Put the sticker on my car. Now I'm driving around with a registration and my insurance. Well, come to find out, their system has a little bit of a lag. So, although it issued me a registration, a couple days later, it then canceled that registration, suspended it. No notification to me, nothing in the mail. So I was driving around for a while with a suspended registration that I didn't know. Ended up getting pulled over like literally 100 feet away. This must be where they trained the rookie cops, because I think that's what happened before that. Got pulled over, got a little ticket, went to the DMV, paid a $500 fine, went to the court, showed it to the judge. He said, okay, now pay a $148 fine. Now, mind you, all this whole time I'm driving around with valid insurance and valid registration. I was never stopped without insurance or without registration, okay? So I go through that process. It turns out I had like a pseudo memory. I thought that I had paid this $148 fine. $148. I thought that I had paid it. I hadn't. It went late, still not sending any notice to me. They issued a warrant, still not sending any notice to me. I end up out of my car in handcuffs. Luckily, the cops were rather cool and let me arrange with family and neighbors so that my car didn't get impounded, and they took me off to jail. I go through the whole booking process. I'm there about a half hour, and they call me, and they say, listen, you're here on now a $398 fine. And if you can pay $150 within an hour, we'll let you go. So I was basically held for $150 ransom, which was no problem. I paid it, put it on a card. So now, but the situation in all of this is, that first section, so much of that first section was automated. It was automated. There was no human, it's robots now, basically. From the computer system that issued out the cancellation of my registration to the system that, took the fine. I went in, the system when I didn't pay it, that basically auto-generated a warrant. The cops don't know what the hell this is. They just see there's a guy with a warrant. They put me in jail, put me in the holding cell, pay a little fine. I recently paid the rest of the fine. But at any time, had they sent me mail, I would have been happy to pay all of this. But this is the state. This is where we're at. And no one's responsible down the whole line. There's no human responsibility. And every single human that I dealt with could totally be automated and will be automated. And the question arises, if we allow the state to have this kind of power, and as we're coming towards automation, what does that potentially mean? We're going to talk to Adam about all the weirdness that happened with him. So we've got creeping collectivism. The Pope. Our first story. The Pope's gone commie. Straight up. Breitbart came out with a story about the Pope and a message that he sent to the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences meeting in the Vatican. Now, here's the Breitbart story. Pope Francis warns against invasion of libertarianism. But I know people will be like, Breitbart. So I wanted to go and get the original message. What he says here about libertarianism, I think, is very important. I have said many, many times that what I believe is that, and the reason why I cover Catholic Church stuff and why I think it's important, is I believe that the state will eventually end up much like the Catholic Church is today. That the Catholic Church used to be one of the most powerful institutions, and it was a state. Vatican City still is, but it was an uber state that could do just about anything. And I don't think it's likely that the state will go all the way away, because the Catholic Church never went all the way away, but they are prime example of right collectivism, right? Left collectivism being communist, right collectivism being religious. And collectivism starts looking like collectivism no matter which side of the spectrum it's on, much the way that individualism, whether it's right individualism, right libertarian, or left libertarian, looks very much alike. So here's the original message. This is off the Vatican's website. The message from the Holy Father to the participants in the plenary session of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, which this is happening right now. Their plenary meeting. I want to read what he said about libertarianism. I'm going to read the whole section in his own words here, and I'll put it up while I do. Finally, I cannot but speak of the serious risks associated with the invasion at high levels of culture and education in both universities and in schools of positions of libertarian individualism. A common feature of this fallacious paradigm is that it minimizes the common good. You remember I talked about the common good in my rant last week. Funny that he would bring it up now. That is, living well, quote, and, quote, a good life in the community framework, and exalts the selfish ideal that deceptively proposes a, quote, beautiful life. If individualism affirms that it is only the individual who gives value to things and interpersonal relationships, and so it is only the individual who decides what is good and what is bad, then libertarianism, today in fashion, preaches that to establish freedom and individual responsibility, it is necessary to resort to the idea of, quote, self-causation. Thus, libertarian individualism denies the validity of the common good because, on the one hand, it supposes that the very idea of common implies the constriction of at least some individuals, and the other, that the notion of good deprives freedom of its essence. This is some serious doublespeak. But this is the part that really got me. The radicalization of individualism in libertarian and therefore antisocial terms leads to the conclusion that, and this is in italics, everyone has the, quote, right to expand as his powers allow, even at the expense of the exclusion and marginalization of the most vulnerable majority. The vulnerable majority. I mean, when you talk about doublethink, if the majority is the majority, how on earth can the majority be vulnerable? This goes against every idea of Western society. Look around, look in history at those populations that have been victims of genocide. Does the minority oppress the majority? How could the minority oppress the majority? And in fact, the smallest minority, the minority that as Western society throughout history has seen as the most important in protecting, is the individual. The individual is the minority that is vulnerable to the majority. The entire idea of the U.S. Constitution, the entire experiment of the United States that caught fire and is the example to the world and has been an example for freedom. All of the rights, the Bill of Rights is all about the government not being able to have complete dominion over the individual. It's the right of the individual to speak freely. It's the right of the individual to assemble with other individuals. It's the right of the individual to keep and bear arms. It's the right of the individual to be safe and secure in his home and his possessions. It's the right of the individual to a fair trial. So you imagine what the Pope is really saying here. He's saying that those ideas like the right to a free trial, the right to a fair trial, the right to a trial by jury, the right to due process, the right to freedom of speech infringes and marginalizes the vulnerable majority. First off, you can't marginalize a majority. If it's on the margins, it's already the minority. You can't marginalize a majority, but this is what's coming. This is really where it's coming from both the right and the left. So, that's from the right. Let's see what's happening on the left. A little bit about Berkeley.
Not my president! Not my president! Not my president!
This is the November 9th protest of Trump. This is, of course, the famous...
The University of California, Berkeley, going into lockdown Wednesday night. A violent protest erupting on campus over a planned appearance by right-wing speaker Milo Yiannopoulos. Demonstrators
1st.
tearing away barricades, setting fires, and lighting firecrackers.
April 15th. This was the one where Moldy Locks and... So you're seeing all of these are happening. It says more protests were expected with Ann Coulter's upcoming speech that she canceled on April 26th. From the Washington Post. Now, there were protests expected, and there was a little gathering, but overall the Coulter protests that were supposed to happen ended up being very, very peaceful. So this is from Washington Post. There was no Coulter speech, but protesters converged on Berkeley. Ann Coulter's speech at the University of California at Berkeley was canceled, but the debate and hostility that were unleashed by the controversy over the conservative commentator's planned event continued here Thursday. Demonstrators who participated in other recent violent clashes on Berkeley streets began gathering at a city park and on campus Thursday to fight for free speech or to protest hate speech. Many were geared up with helmets, shields, and padding for a confrontation at the park just blocks from the campus and Berkeley High School. And the possibility of violence caused authorities to turn out in force. But the conservative and liberal activists mostly spent the afternoon shouting at one another, physically divided by a police line on opposite sides of the street. A total of 7 people were arrested by campus and city police, and a number of weapons were confiscated, but there were no reports of injuries or property damage. So we've basically, as we said months ago, you empowered. I mean, I was saying this throughout the election. I was saying this right afterwards. We did lots of stories about it. You empowered the violent psychopaths, and now this is just their MO. And somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get hurt. I mean, people have already been hurt. Somebody's going to get really hurt. And the media is playing this up. The media wants this to happen because if it bleeds, it leads. So let's look at some of the things that Antifa is doing. This is from shithitsthefanplan.com. Headline, "There will be blood. Left prepares for war after Berkeley beatdown. Quote, combat training, better equipment, guns." Last week, Trump supporters and leftist social justice warriors met on the political field of battle in Berkeley, California. Words were exchanged, as were punches. And while an alt-right leader was punched in the face, by all accounts, even the social justice warriors admit that they got a major beatdown. This prompted a Reddit discussion among the left's tolerant resistance movement, with many asking how they can more effectively go to war against anyone who disagrees with their social, political, and economic views. The anti-Trump protesters at the rally were ill-prepared for what they came to Berkeley to confront and are now trying to figure out ways to ensure it doesn't happen again. In short, as predicted, they are turning to militancy and mob action by mobilizing individuals and groups to attend combat training seminars, acquiring better equipment like baseball bats and helmets, and of course, if things go really bad, guns. You have to shun these people. It doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right. The people who are out there violent must be shunned. You must say, "not in my name," the same way that you would say about war, because this is how war starts. This is how the Bolsheviks started. This is how the Nazis got started. They're little groups out in the street in violent protest over what? Over what? And they're not really protesting the government. They're not really protesting the state. They're mad at just people walking around. I mean, here we have a kind of a prime example of how this happens. We've shown many videos of this, but here's yet another one. This one was from, I believe this is just a week and a half ago. This is what the alt-right leaders getting punched in the face. This is what that really is.
That's not how doxing works.
I'm not going to.
That's a Nazi.
I'm not a Nazi. What are you doing, man? Hey!
Whoa!
You got a problem?
Yeah, I got a fucking problem. You want to fight? Fuck away from me.
I'm standing here. I don't want to fight, man. I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight, man.
No. He attacked. This is self-defense. Whoa,
This is not, no.
Self-defense. I was
We
guys.
have the entire, we have the
I have
whole
the
thing
whole
on
thing
camera.
on camera.
We're going to check out
Yo.
Listen to them lying. Listen to them all lying.
Yeah.
He got
I'm arrested. Yo, I'm racing. Put your hands behind your back.
Fuck, dude. Dude.
You're about to take a picture.
I got you, fam. I got you, fam. Hey, I'm gonna win this one for you.
Thank you.
Good shit. I'm gonna win this one for you, dude. This kinda
Antifa
sucks
terrorist
right now.
arrested for assaulting Jack Posobiec.
So Jack Posobiec gets punched in the face. And they say, did you notice? It was self-defense. It was self-defense. Now, the cops saw the whole thing happen, so they know it's not self-defense, right? The cops will actually witness the act. This is really one of the few moments when the police officers actually are going to get the whole thing right. But this idea of saying it's self-defense, it's self-defense. Now, self-defense is when violence is moral. But to say that the initiation of violence, to call it self-defense, which is what Antifa does, is not immoral, it's amoral. It's completely turning the idea of morality completely on its head. It's by definition the initiation of violence cannot be self-defense. But if the initiation of violence is self-defense, then the initiation of violence is moral. These people have to be shunned. They have to be stopped. Especially if you agree with, if you're a socialist, these are the people that it's most important you don't put into power. These are the people that it's most important that you don't give a platform to, that you don't listen to, that you tell are crazy, that you engage in debate. Because if you don't, first thing that happens is they take control of the narrative. The second thing that happens is you get a backlash from the other side. Now, I don't know if this is true, and I think it's probably not, but SPLC Hate Watch is reporting that a new alt-right, quote, fight club is ready for street violence. From the SPLCcenter.org. A new fight club fraternity of young, white, pro-Trump men is being formed, its organizers claim, to defend free speech rights by, quote, alt-right leaders and engage in street fighting. Kyle Chapman, a California activist arrested earlier this month in a clash in Berkeley between anti-fascist protesters and pro-Trump demonstrators, announced this week he is forming the Fraternal Order of Alt Knights, cleverly called FOAK, F-O-A-K. Chapman, who uses the internet meme, quote, based stickman, said his new militant, highly masculine group will be the tactical defensive arm of the Proud Boys, another group that shows up at pro-Trump rallies looking to rumble with counter-protesters. Quote, we don't fear the fight, we are the fight, Chapman said in a recent social media post announcing FOAK's formation. I'm proud to announce that my newly created Fraternal Order of Alt Knights will be partnering with Proud Boys, Chapman said, with the full approval of its founder, Gavin McInnes. McInnes is a co-founder of Vice, although he and the magazine severed ties 10 years ago, and more recently has been a frequent guest on Fox News and a contributor for the racist site The Dare, where he denigrated Muslims and called Asian Americans slopes and rice balls. Okay, first off, Gavin McInnes he's another troll. Brilliant guy. He's like a Milo Yiannopoulos type, and he uses absurdity. He's talking about how absurd this whole situation is. He says some pretty ridiculous shit, and he has said some racist things, but it's part of his shtick. And you know what? That is exactly the free speech that needs to be protected. I would not hang out with Gavin McInnes, but I also don't think Gavin McInnes is probably, I mean, I know that supposedly he punched somebody at a rally, but I don't think that he's organizing violence. I think he's a volatile individual with some issues, but he's very smart. He's very, very smart. And some of the things that he says are unfortunate facts. He's a proponent of hate facts, as they now call it, hate facts. Those things that are facts, but that make other groups look bad. I mean, the hate fact is the new stereotype, I guess, right? But it's deeper than a stereotype. It's the fact behind the stereotype. But these are things that, as a culture, if we want to move forward, that we need to talk about, right? We need to talk about the things that we see in each other, and we need to really look and say, hey, is that me? Am I behaving that way? As individuals. As individuals. Because the problem that Gavin McInnes has is the same problem that Antifa has. and it's a problem of collectivism. Now, I very much doubt, this thing seems like it's straight out of the Onion, this fraternal order of alt-knights. But that's the left making shit up about the collectivists on the right. The collectivists on the right make shit up about the collectivists on the left. And what do you end up with? You end up with the Soviet Union, or you end up with Nazi Germany. And like I say, to bring it back, as we get more and more automated and the bureaucracy has more and more power, the point where the power is shifts further and further towards a single person at the top of a bureaucracy, usually not even elected, making policy, not law, and then that policy is put into the system and off it goes. And how do you even change it? And this policy over here affects only a few people, and this policy here also a few, and this policy here also a few. It's so dispersed. So yes, everyone is affected by all of the policies, but so few are affected by any given policy that organizing to end it is virtually impossible. And there's no room for appeal. What are you going to appeal to, a robot? And this is why it's important now, as this whole automation system comes about, that before the algorithms are in place, that we address collectivism, that we have a real conversation about it. It probably won't happen. We probably are going to have to learn this the hard way. Here's one of the, it's funny. Vinstradamus again. We are now seeing the silencing of individuals by these collective-minded people through the use of the bureaucracy. We covered the CIA, the recent WikiLeaks CIA Vault 7 release. We covered that. I showed that it was pretty ridiculous. It's yet another example of internal bureaucracy, that there was not much to the tech that was, at least the tech that was released in Vault 7, and because of that, I was called a CIA shill. And it's funny and ironic that today I'm looking on some of the YouTube live chat, and people immediately, before the show even started, talking about my guest, Adam Kokesh. He's an FBI double agent, because you're always in on the conspiracy. You're always in on the conspiracy as soon as you bring up something that shreds the person's conspiracy fantasy. At the time, people were saying I was a CIA shill, and I had this response, and it's important. I didn't make any conjectures. I just pointed out what was actually there, and showed step by step by step with the actual documents. So showing the actual documents and putting out the actual truth, the actual facts, if it doesn't conform with someone else's conspiracy theory, now you get added into the conspiracy theory. Right? So today, just for them, I decided I was going to wear my little owl, my little Moloch, since now I'm an official member of the Illuminati, my little Moloch, and I just want to send out to the CIA. I have not gotten the check. Okay? You clearly know my email address, and since you can have access to my phone already, why don't you send me a text, let me know either the tracking number of the check, or shoot me over a text and I'll shoot you my Bitcoin address. You can send me my payment in Bitcoin, okay? Because I haven't gotten it yet. Did you get it?
Not yet.
Did it come to the studio?
Not yet.
Damn them. So a month ago, I'm joking about wearing my little owl in honor of Moloch. For those of you who don't know the whole Moloch situation, very popular among the conspiracy theorist type. So those of you who are on saying Adam Kokesh is an FBI double agent or whatever your current conspiracy is, you probably believe that he's probably hanging out at Bohemian Grove. This is a picture. This, you may recall, Alex Jones went and got video at Bohemian Grove of this ceremony taking place in front of the Moloch owl statue that's out there in the middle of the forest in Northern California. And yeah, so the owl is one of the symbols of the Illuminati for sure. Moloch, a god of the Illuminati. I went to university in DC. Some of you may know that there is a giant owl radiating out from, built into the streets, radiating out from the Capitol. Of course, Washington, D.C., designed by a Mason, Pierre L'Enfant. L'Enfant Plaza in D.C. is named after him. So it's a planned city. Very strange layout of the city if you've ever tried to walk through it. It's a very, very strange layout. I don't know if you can see the owl there, but check it out here. See that? Clearly an owl. I mean, how could it be anything else, right? So, imagine my surprise when, or maybe it wasn't surprise, when this week it was announced that Google has a new project. They're going to try to fight fake news, which we all know is actually the real news. We have been, Activist Post has been on the top of the fake news list, every single list that has come out. And so, as long as we've been a part of that organization and doing this show, that charge has been leveled. So let's learn a little bit about Google's project, which coincidentally they named Project Owl. This is from Search Engine Land. Google's Project Owl, a three-pronged attack on fake news and problematic content. Project Owl is Google's internal name for its endeavor to fight back on problematic searches. The owl name was picked for no specific reason, Google said. Okay. However, the idea of an owl as a symbol for wisdom is appropriate. Google's effort seeks to bring some wisdom back into areas where it is sorely needed. As you can see, this is Danny Sullivan doing quite a bit of editorial work as opposed to real reporting, as he ironically reports on fake news. Quote, problematic searches is a term I've been giving to situations where Google is coping with the consequences of the, quote, post-truth world. People are increasingly producing content that reaffirms a particular worldview or opinion, regardless of actual facts. In addition, people are searching in enough volume for rumors, urban myths, slurs, or derogatory topics that they're influencing the search suggestions that Google offers in offensive and possibly dangerous ways. These are problematic searches because they don't fall in the clear-cut areas where Google has typically taken action. Google has long dealt with search spam, where people try to manipulate its results outside acceptable practices for monetary gain. It has had to deal with piracy. It's had to deal with poor quality content showing up for popular searches. Problematic searches aren't any of those issues. Instead, they involve fake news, where people completely make things up. They involve heavily biased content. They involve rumors, conspiracies, and myths. They can include shocking or offensive information. They pose an entirely new quality problem for Google, hence my dubbing them, quote, problematic searches. This is a word we are going to see coming up over and over and over again. It's actually a relatively new word. I wanted to, it's funny because it's been coming up in my life, and I'm going to share something with you a little bit later that's to that point. I found this great, this is from, coincidentally, or not coincidentally, this is from 2014 from a site called The Awl, not the owl, the AWL, the tool, the owl, the awl, excuse me. It's from 2014. Someone seeing this in 2014, picture of the dog chasing its tail. The title is The Internet Has a Problem Attic. This is by Johanna King Slutsky. Thought it's brilliant. It goes into the history of the word problematic, but I pulled out a section here, and I think she really hit the nail on the head. Very prophetic. So let me read. This is from Johanna King Slutsky in The Owl. The word problematic is a fire hose for what exactly? I know it's loud and sprays everywhere, but I can't locate its target. It is common knowledge in certain corners of the internet that problematic is codependent with the think piece, that short, poorly researched form of essay that exists to criticize recent cultural phenomena on usually disingenuous political or moral grounds. Not only did problematic become popular because it suits identity politics and sounds smart, it's also highly shareable. Problematic bundles urgency, seriousness, and debatability into a single vague word, which is great for both sound bites and tweets. Perhaps coincidentally, but probably not, these double prongs of technology, TV news and social media, correspond chronologically to the double spike you get in problematic, the use of the word, in the 60s and early aughts. You don't need to know the specifics of a, quote, problematic allegation to share it on Facebook. Problematic situations are never crises, which is damning when you consider that problematic tends to be used in critical discourse on racism, sexism, and homophobia. Problematic whines, it does not act. It takes baths. But most of all, it, like racism, sexism, classism, ableism, and heterosexism, is definitely bad for indefinite reasons. So, some are problematic. Who is going to be affected? Who is problematic? Well, who has Google already said and already indicated through their actions is problematic? Well, our old friend and Moloch enemy, Alex Jones. And InfoWars. Google contractors have been ordered to rate InfoWars as a low-quality and untrusted site. InfoWars says that this is a secret Google program. Well, that was April 17th. Turns out they were right. Project Owl is no longer secret. So was that a conspiracy theory? It was a theory about a conspiracy that turned out to be true. That happens a lot. This one was from back in February. Actually, we were going to try to have Mike Adams on the show, but I was in Acapulco when this happened. Google blacklists Natural News, removes 140,000 pages from its index. As I understand it, the pages have now been reinstated at the last time that I checked, but the question is, was this just a test? Was this just a test? A little closer to home, Google Ad Network recently banned our domain, activistpost.com, from participating after years of a mutually beneficial relationship. As many of you know, we've been on every ridiculous fake news list, including some that accused us of being Russian propaganda, which we jokingly admit to here. Well, it appears that we have been put on some kind of official blacklist that is meant to starve us out. In just this past week, Activist Post was removed from participating in two major ad networks, Google Ad Exchange and Amazon CPM ads programs, both of which we had been using for some time. Revenue from those sources is off by 60%. So as a result, the folks over at Activist Post have started a Patreon page. I would advise you and implore you, if you enjoy their content, to go over and support them. There would not be a Vin Armani show were it not for Activist Post. They reached out to me. They've worked with us constantly through this process. They are the providers of, they curate our news after we have our editorial meetings weekly. They've put in a lot of work, and this is how they're able to survive. We are not financially linked to one another, except we both partner on, both Activist Post and Christian and I partner on the Counter Markets newsletter project. But besides that, they don't make any money from us at the show. We don't make any money from them. It is an agorist partnership, but that ad revenue is how they make their living. It's how they're able to provide such great content on a daily basis. It's how they're able to pay their contributors. So there are people who don't like to ask for money. They never have up until this point. But if you enjoy the content, you need to, and if you believe that we should be supporting each other, Google's not going to let it happen. Amazon's not going to let it happen. And it's not that it's even anybody at Google. Once it's in the algorithm, like you say, it's gone. It's gone. We talked about this in previous weeks with the new copyright infringement stuff. So that's not, it's to say, look, they're private companies. Of course they can do it. Of course they can. And it may not even be nefarious, but some person at some point at some point in the mix enters you into the algorithm and it's over for you. How do you even get out? Who do you even question? Who do you even protest to? Protest back to another robot? And then some customer service person in India looks it over as one of the 1,000 things that they're looking at that day. Soon that'll be an algorithm as well. So we have to, it looks like, we're going to have to start supporting each other. We're going to have to start paying for this content to exist. So Activist Post, they have their Patreon page there. On the topic of problematic, since we are coming close to getting into the second hour, I want to get as much time as I possibly can for our guest, Adam Kokesh. I want to talk with him for the whole hour if we possibly can. So, in order for me to get myself prepared for that, since I'm all by myself, I prepared a little piece for you, a little rant about this situation with things being problematic. And we're going to go to that, then go to break, and we will be back with our guest, Adam Kokesh. A close family member is a university sociology professor. Brilliant guy. He got his PhD at the age of 30 and has already authored a nationally acclaimed book. He at one time was an avowed Marxist, although now I think he takes a little more of a centrist and reasoned view towards things, but he is able to articulate many of the views that those who are on the more radical left in academia hold. And he has some affinity towards them. Now, you know, if you watch the show or you know my views, that that's really the polar opposite of where my mindset is and where my own moral and political guideposts are. However, I have viewed it, especially over the last 6 months or so as I've been doing this show, I've viewed having him as someone that I could bounce ideas off of as being very, very valuable. I've really come to the point where it's important to me to, when I'm thinking about ideas, to first seek to understand and then seek to be understood. I'd hate to come on the show or go online or write in counter markets and debate against, argue against a straw man of the Marxist socialist side of any issue. I'd much rather get a good understanding of where that side is coming from and actually argue against the arguments that they're making. That way I can really test to see if my arguments are valid, if I'm thinking rationally and logically. So I have valued his input, and we've had quite a bit of dialogue over the last 6 months, although recently that stopped. One starting point for many of our conversations has been the work and also the controversy surrounding Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, who has been on this show as a guest, who was sort of the interview I was really, really waiting to have, and I'm glad that he came on. I thought it was a fantastic interview, and it was received very, very well. Although recently, I sent him over sort of a starting point, asking his opinion on something, and he said he no longer wanted to have any dialogue. He no longer wanted dialogue regarding any of these issues, and particularly when it came to Jordan Peterson, because he found him, quote, transphobic and problematic. It took me back because I have consumed probably hundreds of hours of Dr. Peterson's content at this point. His lectures, his workshops, his speeches, and I found his work to be inspiring, informative. It's changed the way that I think about myself and that I think about the world. I also know that one of the most recent pieces of content was 2 days worth of a symposium hosted by Theron Miller, who is a trans individual, a bit of a YouTube star, very thoughtful, very coherent and intelligent, who sat on a stage for an entire day with Dr. Peterson, stepping through his beliefs and his understanding. someone who supports him. I know that a transphobic person would not have sat on that stage, but more importantly, it kicked off to me the idea that I wonder if he thinks I'm transphobic and problematic. Because I would certainly, if I interpreted Jordan Peterson to be a transphobic individual, I would want nothing to do with him. And I think that this particular individual knows me well enough to know that I'm not bigoted in any way, and certainly not towards trans people. So that aside, it really got me thinking about being labeled as problematic. Because if Jordan Peterson is problematic, and I am pushing forward the ideas that Jordan Peterson has as valuable, giving him a platform, does that make me problematic? And we're seeing the word problematic, the label problematic, as a precursor to voices being silenced one way or the other, whether that's being disinvited from speaking engagements, whether that's having content removed from online, being deplatformed, whether that's like Milo Yiannopoulos having your already signed book publishing deal scrapped. It got me thinking, what is it? What is problematic? It's very vague, and certainly the people who are using the term don't have any real metric for how you would label someone problematic. But I've thought about it, and I basically come up with this. First, I want to tell you what problematic is not. Clearly, problematic is not wrong. Problematic can't be wrong. And it can't be demonstrably wrong. Because if I say the sky is orange, well, sometimes it is, right? But if I say 2 + 2 = 5, I'm not problematic, I'm just wrong. What problematic is problematic is right. It's right, it's logical, it's rational, and that's the problem. Problematic is when a thesis or an argument holds up to a test against logic, to a test against reason, where it doesn't have fallacies, and where it makes the opposing view, it displays the fallacies in the opposing view. Thus the reason to eliminate dialogue. This is why dialogue must be shut down when someone is problematic. See, because if they were wrong, it should be easy to demonstrate. You stand on a stage with them, you let them say their side, you say your side, you show the fallacies in their argument, they look like an idiot, and you continue on with your day. Your idea has won out in the marketplace of ideas. But when you're problematic, you must be silenced. The other thing that I noticed about being labeled problematic, because it's a new label for an old concept. The old concept of why people should be silenced and how they should be silenced. We've gotten a lot more technologically subtle, but it's very, very old. And one thing that makes you problematic is a belief in the primacy of the individual. Let's take some examples through history. Socrates, 400 BC. He was problematic. Found guilty by his countrymen of corrupting the youth. That was the problematic of their day. Sentenced to death. He chose suicide. Socrates is known for the Socratic dialogue. Socrates is someone who believed that two people speaking to each other could come to a greater truth. That two people pulling apart each other's arguments in a peaceful, rational way could arrive at the truths of the universe. Two individuals. That the truth was within the individual, and that it could be expressed through peaceful interaction with another individual. He's problematic. He's got to go. 400 years later, another problematic guy shows up. Someone who said that your relationship with the divine was not about your relationship with some religion, that your relationship with the divine was an individual relationship. That guy, he was problematic. So they put him on a cross and silenced him. Gandhi, he was able to free an entire country through his own personal example of sacrifice. He was problematic. Bullet took care of that. Martin Luther King, what was his dream? That he'd live in a world where his children would not be judged by the color of their skin, a collectivist idea, but by the content of their character, an individualist idea. He was problematic, and a rifleman silenced him. So, as we see this word bandied about, as we're told all of these people are problematic, the one thing that you can be sure of is they have something very important to say, something that's rational, something that makes sense, something that the other side can't pull apart or can't show a fallacy with. And the second thing is, they hold the primacy of the individual to be a key to peace and to freedom. Remember, the individual, see, that's the smallest minority. And when you watch, if what you choose to do is just watch, as these problematic individuals are silenced, have their platform and ability to speak taken away, have their incomes ruined, have their voices squelched for speaking out as individuals for individuals. You should probably remember the words of Martin Niemöller, who was a prominent Protestant pastor, an outspoken public foe of Adolf Hitler, spent the last 7 years of Nazi rule in concentration camps. He's best remembered for this quote: "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/VinArmani. Also on Twitter and Periscope at Vin Armani is my handle there. And of course, we are streaming on the Facebook page of our content partner, Activist Post. As I said earlier, we never ask for any money. So we, on occasion, do offer some products that we think will increase the value in your life, and just such a product is a partnership between us here at the show and Activist Post. Counter Markets, Trends and Strategies for Maximum Freedom. It's our news group and, our newsletter and private Facebook group. We're talking about the coming changes in the world, both in the political sphere, but particularly in the economic sphere. We talk about automation, we talk about cryptocurrency, we talk about how to survive in this new coming paradigm. We're actually coming into, in just this week actually will be released our newest issue. But if you go now, you can get your first issue for free, absolutely free. No ulterior motives, no nothing. We really do believe that you'll get a lot out of it. This most recent issue, our March issue, is over 60 pages. And if you decide that you do want to subscribe, we have extended our founders discount, which is like, I think it's like a 30% discount, but it's only for those people who pay with cryptocurrency. So look, what a great, if you have not messed around with Bitcoin or any of the other cryptos, and we take, I think, about 7 or 8 different coins. If you have not messed around with any of them, what a great excuse to go and get a wallet so that you can go and get yourself some counter markets. So, one of the people leading the charge of freedom is a guest that I am very, very happy to bring on to the show today, Mr. Adam Kokesh. Adam Kokesh is an author, speaker, media personality, and activist. He's an Iraq war veteran and will be running in the 2020 election for U.S. president, as if I even had to make that introduction. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Vin. Although I gotta say, like you with your great promo plug there, may I respectfully amend that?
Yes, please.
Because we all, anybody who cares about freedom, cares about Bitcoin, cares about cryptocurrency, cares about overthrowing the money monopoly of the United States Federal Reserve System, and you're talking about giving people these incentives. Well, really, the greatest, if not champion of freedom, I think the person who really moved the ball forward the most in our generation, aside from the still anonymous Satoshi, who, creator of Bitcoin, would be Ross Ulbricht, who is predictably sitting in a jail cell right now for giving more people a reason to use cryptocurrency than anybody else, even Satoshi, because I don't know, the only reason I created a wallet was so I could buy drugs anonymously on the internet. I think
that's true.
Man.
That's true for a lot of people, man. And I want to thank you, a reciprocal thank you, because you just promoted next week's show, because our guest for next week is Lynn Ulrich. So thanks. See how it works. See how it works, man.
Saint of activist mothers.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So, speaking of being in jail, I thought that we would lead with this, because I don't know if you caught the beginning of the show, but I spent Wednesday afternoon in jail because of a failure to pay on something that I totally had thought that I had paid. But yeah, I got clinked up, thrown in the back of a car, it just carted off. I didn't spend much time there, but you had a recent interaction, which in running for president, I find very interesting, because you're already getting to know the Secret Service.
Yes, that's great. Although the first thing I think I'm going to do is fire 90% of the Secret Service. At least that's going to be part of it. I'm definitely not going to need Secret Service harassing activists outside the White House when I'm not president. And yeah, the platform, just so we're clear, because there's nothing less libertarian than saying, I want to be your president.
Right.
So I'm running for not president of the United States. I don't want to be in charge of anybody. I simply want to put the existence of the federal government to a national vote, to a referendum, by running for president on the platform of the peaceful, orderly dissolution of the entire United States federal government. Starting with initiating the process essentially with a single executive order, but I'm sure we'll come back to that.
Yes. That's a huge chunk of this interview, because believe it or not, I have come around from when I first, about 6 months ago, heard you say this here in Vegas. I was very skeptical, and over the last 6 months, believe it or not, I have come around. So we're going to talk about that. And I know there's probably some people out there that are having autistic screeching right now because I said that. but why don't you tell us a little bit about this recent situation that happened? Because, I mean, I know you're no stranger to arrest, but this one's a little bit weird.
Yeah, and it's, a lot of people looked at this arrest and jumped to, oh, conspiracy, oh, this is something about being Adam in Washington, D.C. I don't think that's it. I think it's really just a consequence of the criminalization of everything and the fact that the United States government is keeping track of activists. So backstory here, I was at the Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia when President Trump decided to send bombs into Syria and Tomahawk missiles, and I decided, hey, let's, there's no one doing a protest at the White House. Let's see, is anybody interested? I put it up on Facebook. People were like, yeah, make it happen. We'll show up. We want to help with this. And so I put up a Facebook event, made a couple videos, and for me, this was really about making sure that the troops who are carrying out these orders know that the American people will support them in disobeying unlawful orders that are not in the best interest of the American people. And of course, anything that's an act of war without congressional approval is unconstitutional, is an unlawful order. So by the government's own silly little rules, you have a duty to disobey such unlawful orders. So went to the White House at noon on Monday, and I started doing man on the street interviews, a little stick mic. Hey, how's it going? What are you here for? Talking to a guy who's very anti-gun, who was protesting for greater gun restrictions there. And yes, gun control is a dangerous, violent policy, as I can tell you from the last time I spent 4 months in jail as a result after having my house brutally raided. But as soon as I turned around from this interview, I turned around and I'm surrounded by Secret Service agents, which is not actually a totally new experience for me, but this one was, I just thought it was going to be a great opportunity. So I started interviewing the guys with the microphone. Hey, what are you doing here? And of course they make it clear that they're there to arrest me. And the first officer on the scene says, oh yeah, thank you, there's the video. The first officer on the scene, this is a couple minutes after the point I'm at right now, says, are you Adam Kokesh? And so I guess Kokesh is my new nickname. People are calling me Kokesh. But he said, we believe there's a stay-away order for you for the White House. And it's funny because for 2 years I was not allowed in the District of Criminals as a condition of my probation. But this time I was totally free and clear, had nothing like any kind of restrictions like this. So I go in and assume that they're just, they're confused and this is going to be another fun opportunity to embarrass the Secret Service. And instead, one of them comes up and says, we believe there's a warrant for your arrest. I'm like, well, that's a little different from there being a stay-away order. And he says, are you Adam Kokesh? And I go, well, who's asking? Am I legally required to answer this question? And of course, he just says, well, yes, you're being detained and blah, 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 and puts me in handcuffs. And I was able to hand my microphone and my camera off to Heather Mullins, who was helping me out that day, working the camera, doing a great job. And she started live streaming from my phone, which was awesome to have that, accountability right away so people knew what was happening. And this was for a warrant from about 2 years ago when I had an ankle bracelet on, a GPS monitor, for being on probation, and went through a TSA checkpoint at the Baltimore airport. And when they were swabbing it for explosives, they said, I said, hey, what are you doing? So, oh, yeah, we just have to check, make sure this isn't explosives or a bomb or something like that. And I go, don't worry, it's probably not a bomb. As in, like, I can't take responsibility for this thing. I didn't put it on me. Obviously, it's here against my will. And they recognize me every time I go through a TSA checkpoint. I have a few million views on videos of me embarrassing the TSA, as they make it so easy sometimes. And when I said, don't worry, it's probably not a bomb, they went, he said bomb, and flipped the switch, and sirens go off, and lights flash and everything, and they call me down, and I get locked in a basement room to talk to the FBI, and they let me go with a citation. It's like a traffic ticket.
Right.
Now, I wasn't going to show up anyway for a court hearing for this, but I got a notice in the mail right before the hearing anyway from the TSA saying that they'd reduced it to a warning. So, case closed, issue cleared. Yeah. I've been arrested a couple times since then, and they go, hey, there's a warrant out for your arrest in Maryland, but it's non-extraditable, so don't worry about it. And I told the Secret Service guys, it's like, hey, there might be a warrant for my arrest, but it's not extraditable, so you guys are going to have to let me go. And they said, oh, no, it's limited extradition, so we can arrest you in D.C. for this. So I went to jail that night, and it's a strange kind of torture. If you've never done, a few days in jail, you really should experience government up close and personal. But yeah, and it gets easier over time, just so you know, like you get more comfortable, you get in a place where you're more established, you get access to commissary and all that stuff. But in this case, I did a week in jail. The first night was, steel cot,
Right.
no mattress, no blanket. I'm sleeping on my boots, like folding them up to try to make a pillow. Light on 24 hours, right in my face. Giant fan in the hallway with this like really obnoxious white noise bugging me out. And didn't get any food for 24 hours. Then the next afternoon, get in front of a judge. And this is just another really sick part of the legal system, certainly not a justice system, where when you get arrested, they put you through this really difficult circumstance. Right? I mean, and this is the first time I hadn't been fed for over 24 hours in custody, but no sleep, no food, 24 hours, and then you're expected to go in front of a judge and make life-altering legal decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And this is how they just sort of shuffle people through with public defenders. Next case, next case. And they said that they were offering me a $10,000 bond, and I was like, well, I don't have $10,000 handy, so I guess I'm staying in jail. And it was for a 3-day hold while they wait for Maryland to come and get me if they want to pick me up on that warrant. And of course they didn't. So I sat in jail for 3 days, and then after the full 72 hours, it was the end of a day. So I had to wait till the next day to go to court. Went to court again. They said nobody wanted you, so we're gonna have to let you go. And that was that. I don't think it's any kind of big conspiracy. I think this is just, like I said, a consequence of the existing dynamics of government and being an activist. And while I was being arrested by the Secret Service at the White House, I said, how did you guys know I was going to be here? Like they were really obviously looking for me. And they said, oh yeah, we have someone who's keeping an eye on you. We have people watching your YouTube channel and keeping track of you on social media. And I was like, I mean, I can't like fault you for that, but you just go like from that to, well, everything's illegal. Well, you've probably got a warrant somewhere.
Right.
Well, we can arrest you for something. And in my case, they probably would have threatened to arrest me for just filming on the sidewalk or filming commercially without a permit, because, oh, hey, bad guy, we've got eyes on him, activist. Oh, okay, he's doing something illegal. Whereas, the odds of me getting arrested aren't any more than I think with any random American. If they said, hey, that's a bad guy, let's keep an eye on him.
Sure. It's interesting when you say you don't really see that it's a conspiracy. I almost see it as what we're talking about is, to me, it's worse. It's worse than a conspiracy because it really it doesn't even require a conspiracy. The web, we're constantly, all of us are breaking law. We're all pretty much arrestable all the time.
Yeah.
And when you've empowered the state to that degree, what I was talking about at the in the beginning when I was talking about my particular situation, very, very similar, but the amount of that's sort of out of anybody's hands, right? That's like automated, where everybody can